Kilimanjaro, that great mountain overlooking the African continent, rises with its majestic peak as a symbol of greatness and inspiration. It is adorned with diverse green tropical forests under a sky that may change from blue to gray depending on its mood. It holds within its folds the secrets of nature, while wearing an icy crown of snow atop its summit. Its name in Swahili means, Mountain of the Devil's Cold, a name that may sound terrifying, but the climb itself is not as daunting as its name suggests. The experience there is full of excitement and beauty, where adventurers can explore breathtaking landscapes and amazing environmental diversity. With several routes to the summit, reaching the top becomes achievable for many, making this journey an unforgettable experience despite the challenging name. Africa, our rich yet impoverished continent, holds within it a multitude of cultures and peoples, vast lands of plains, mountains, and valleys. It contains immense natural riches, from gold and diamonds to tanzanite, oil, and gas. It is also abundant with farms and animals of all kinds, and is distinguished by the kindness of its people, both young and old. Despite the historical plundering of its resources and the ongoing economic and media marginalization it faces, discovering what lies beyond the walls of your country can reveal to you the truth, beauty, and grandeur of this continent. I will not ignore the rosy picture and claim that all people are good. Sometimes you may encounter an exception, and perhaps you may be that exception. What matters is that we open our hearts and minds to explore the different dimensions of this continent, appreciating its diversity and ancient heritage. The journey settled in my mind since childhood, as I was always fascinated by nature and animals, and I shared the story of my love for them in a previous video. Climbing mountains is one of my greatest passions, as it gives me a sense of freedom and immersion in the beauty of the world around me. Contemplating the mountains with their grandeur and awe-inspiring presence, watching the clouds caress their peaks, and experiencing their terrifying silence and steadfastness against the winds. This is truly awe-inspiring. In contemplating them, you are reminded of the greatness and majesty of their creator, the perfection of his design and creation, which reminds you of your own weakness in the face of nature. Yet, you remain curious and defiant, hoping to tame it and uncover one of its many secrets. As was my habit in childhood, especially during elementary school, after returning from school, I would put down my heavy backpack filled with books that burdened the backs of children in the 80s and 90s with their weight and lightness of knowledge. Then, I would go outside to play football with my neighborhood friends, imitating the kicks of Majid and Bassam. And if the weather was cold, I would sit and watch TV with my grandmother, where the channels would talk about mountains and animals. The name Kilimanjaro was often mentioned in some episodes, and I would see scientists, nature conservationists, and mountain climbing enthusiasts talking about it. I would be captivated by the beauty of the mountain, and my imagination would take me to that place as if my soul had left my body and seen the place before I did. There were also other episodes about Everest and the difficulty of climbing it, and I would be amazed by the arduousness of that journey, as it could take weeks to ascend. All these scenes fueled my passion for adventure and increased my desire to explore those amazing worlds. Most of my research revolved around animals, as I would read magazines and books related to them, conduct research in internet cafes, and then write about them in papers and notebooks that I still keep to this day. Even my school projects were about this topic. I've strayed from our great mountain story, to the point where I felt the sky above it growl. Sorry, our revered mountain. The story begins several years before the summer of 2023, when I was browsing the internet and stumbled upon a post mocking the cancellation of the visa requirement for Tanzania for Moroccan citizens. For me, as a Moroccan, it wasn't mocking at all. In fact, it was wonderful news, a source of motivation, and the beginning of planning for the adventure. Many people hope for visa cancellations from economically powerful countries, but that is difficult at the moment, and I don't need to elaborate on the obvious. Tanzania, with its beautiful nature and rich culture, became my potential destination. I began dreaming of wandering through its forests, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and discovering wildlife in the savannah. 2 days before heading to Tanzania, I was on a trip to Malaysia with my cousin. My Nike sneakers got a bit torn, and I needed to buy a strong pair of hiking shoes, but I couldn't find anything that fit me, and there wasn't enough time to search properly. On our way to the hotel, we came across a second-hand shoe store, and we decided to have a look. Most of the shoes were sturdy, but the sizes weren't right for me. I kept looking until I found the perfect size. It was a Korean-made pair, and the price was very low, only 50 Moroccan dirhams. I put the shoes on right away, donated my Nike shoes, and then we headed to the hotel. Time passed, and the moment came for me to leave for Tanzania. I said goodbye to my cousin and headed to the airport. This was my first visit to an African country, and I visited Zanzibar first. When I arrived at the airport, the first thing they asked me about, before even my passport, was the yellow fever vaccination card, which I had in the bag I would take after my passport was stamped. It wasn't in my backpack. I told the officer, who might have been a doctor or nurse, that it was in the other bag, and she let me pass without any problem. I left the airport, and the taxi driver took me to the hotel where I stayed for about 3 days. On the way, I spoke with the driver, who was a kind and pleasant person. I understood that he also worked in the tourism industry, which was great for me because I had specific plans for visiting the island, and then I would be heading to Russia for my scheduled meeting with the mountain. I had no time to waste. I briefly told him what I wanted to do on the island. Wander around Stone Town, the old neighborhoods and markets, see the sea turtles and dolphins, and then leave the island. We agreed on a fair price for these activities, and when we arrived at the hotel, I said goodbye to the driver, agreeing to meet him the next morning. Early the next morning, the driver came, and I got to know him better. He was really a nice person. He called a friend of his who owned a boat, and then I bid him farewell, promising we would meet again after the boat trip. I was the only one on the boat, which surprised me because individual trips are usually very expensive, and all the other boats were full of tourists. They all looked at me as if I were heading to visit Bill Gates Island, which was just a few meters away from here. I just wished I could wear sunglasses and look cooler. The island was enchanting with its clear blue waters and golden sunshine, and the atmosphere was made even more beautiful by the appearance of dolphins leaping out of the water. It was the first time I'd seen such a beautiful sight. Their smiling faces, speed, and synchronized leaps were captivating. I started taking pictures of them as tourists began jumping into the water to swim with them. After finishing the filming, I put on the life jacket, as I am one of the world's best Olympic swimmers, and I asked the boat driver if sharks were present in the area. I had read about the presence of sharks near coral reefs but wasn't sure exactly where they could be found. He replied, "No." I felt reassured and then jumped into the water. The underwater world was overflowing with beauty, colorful fish of all shapes and types. I imagined some of them on a grill or in a tagine. The transparency of the blue water was unparalleled. I felt as if I were in a scene from the movie Finding Nemo. After the boat trip, I headed to see the sea turtles. On the way, the driver told me that the locals on the island eat turtles, but recently, many have been poisoned. I replied that the cause could be the turtles eating jellyfish. He was surprised and said, "Maybe you're right." We arrived at our destination, which was a large pond where the ninja turtles were swimming. Sorry, I mean the hawksbill and green sea turtles. Near the area, there was a small park with crocodiles and small deer. A park keeper approached me and asked for my opinion about the park. Although I am against caging animals and believe they should live freely, I knew my opinion wouldn't help, but I suggested expanding one of the walls for the 2 crocodiles in the park. He liked the idea and promised me he would implement it. The 3 days passed quickly, and I toured the island. Zanzibar was vibrant with life in its narrow alleys, with its youth passionate about fishing and its elders as traders. The colorful markets were buzzing with activity, and the historic buildings reflected stunning Arabic and Indian influences. Zanzibar also held an electronic place in my heart, if I can put it that way, because it brought to mind unforgettable scenes from the legendary Metal Gear Solid game. Those scenes, etched into my memory, made me feel as though I was living a real adventure in this enchanting place. The time came for me to leave the beautiful island, and I headed to the airport. It was a small local plane carrying big dreams for its passengers, or at least for one of them. I was extremely tired and hadn't slept much. I arrived at Kilimanjaro airport at night and waited outside for the person responsible for the trip, whom I had been messaging on WhatsApp for almost a year to ask about the details of the journey. I know that a year is a long time, almost like I was planning to travel around the world, but I didn't have enough time or comprehensive information about the itinerary. The person came towards me and asked if I was the one concerned. Out of exhaustion, I replied, "No," until I saw my name. I smiled and said, "Sorry, yes, I am the one." The person laughed and asked if I was feeling sleepy, to which I responded, "Yes, very much." He then told me to follow him to the car. It was a Land Cruiser, typical for safari trips, and the hotel was about 2 hours away from the airport. Finally, I arrived and said goodbye to the driver, who told me that the ascent to the mountain would start the next day at 7 a.m. I fell into a deep sleep, for tomorrow awaited me, a long journey full of challenges. The weather was cold both at night and in the morning. I didn't expect it to be so chilly in this area. Before washing my face, I put on my winter clothes and hiking boots. Then I checked my passport, as I had to carry it with me and not leave it at the hotel. I was worried about rain or water getting into it in some way. I washed my face, feeling the excitement fill my body, and then headed to the breakfast table. The room was filled with tables, and people were preparing for different trips. As I sipped my hot coffee, savoring the taste, I spotted the driver, smiled at him, and he told me that the climbing team was ready and that they were here. Just as I took my second sip of coffee, the team appeared. It was made up of 4 people. Lucas, the mountain guide, a tall, cheerful man in his 30s. Arun, Lucas's friend and assistant, a very friendly person, and 2 others, one of whom was the assistant guide and the cook for the mountain. We greeted the team, and Lucas asked me about my backpack. I pointed to a medium-sized bag and he asked, "Show me what's inside." I opened the bag, thinking whether this journey would end before it even began, and how my coffee had gone cold without me enjoying it. I took out some extra clothes, gloves, a scarf, and a hat. Lucas looked at me, surprised, and asked, "Is that all?" I hesitated, smiled, and replied, "Yes." Deep inside, I saw it as just another simple mountain trip, like the others I had done before. But it was clear they understood the real dangers of mountain climbing, and from their perspective, I must have seemed a bit careless about the equipment. I wasn't careless, but I considered mountain climbing to be a normal thing, and didn't think I needed much equipment. After all, this wasn't a horizontal climb. Lucas grew a bit serious and told me that the gear wasn't enough. I explained that I was used to climbing and that I had been communicating with the driver via WhatsApp, and I had explained that I wanted to climb the mountain in 2 days, which was impossible. We had agreed on a 4-day climb, which was the minimum time needed, since usually such a trip takes 7 days. After he was convinced by my story, Lucas told me we would stop by a friend of his to pick up more equipment. I thanked him for this, took a few more sips of my cold coffee, grabbed my backpack, and joined the team in the Land Cruiser. On the way, we talked and enjoyed some African music and rap. Lucas, who belonged to the Maasai tribe, called himself the King of the Mountain, because he had climbed its summit more times than anyone else. After hours of driving, we arrived at a park with several facilities and a large open area. We took a short rest around a rectangular table and had a light snack. Then, a woman approached me and suggested I buy an internet package to use throughout the climb, which I did. Afterward, Lucas took me to register my name on the climbers list. After the registration, excitement and energy filled me, and the boredom of my daily routine faded away. Nature and adventure were what captivated me on this earth. The group began the climb, carrying climbing and cooking gear. I took my backpack and started walking with the guide. We first passed a checkpoint and a metal detector, then continued on. I'll call this path the forest trail, as it was filled with trees and fertile soil. Beautiful waterfalls, the sound of rushing water, green plants decorating every direction, fresh, cold air that refreshed both the lungs and the mind, and blue monkeys leaping through the forest canopy. The forest was as quiet as the universe, with the occasional break in the silence when the leader of a group of monkeys called out. We walked for about 6 or 7 hours, during which we got to know each other more and exchanged stories about the stunning biodiversity of the area. We had an interesting conversation about the mountain, exchanging information about the animals and plants living there. The guide was impressed by how much I knew about these creatures, and I shared my passion for nature from a young age. Lucas was like a walking encyclopedia, adding lots of valuable information about the animal and plant world. We emerged from the forest trail into a vast green field, home to several beautiful wooden huts. The place was breathtaking, almost like a piece of Iceland. We entered one of the huts, which turned out to be a small restaurant. It was cold inside, and I sat on one of the wooden chairs, waiting for the group to bring the food. After a few minutes, Arun entered, smiling, and placed the food on the table. It was a hot soup, rice, chicken, and hot water to prepare coffee. The coffee package was written in Arabic, which piqued my curiosity to read the name of the country of origin. I don't really remember the country, but it was from the Middle East. I sipped a hot cup of coffee to warm my tired body and senses. Time passed quickly as I wandered and explored the area. Darkness fell swiftly, and I slept inside the sleeping huts. In the bed opposite mine was a Japanese man I had met earlier on the trail. He was a quiet person who didn't speak much English, or maybe just didn't want to, but from what I gathered, he was climbing the mountain alone. I sat for a while browsing my phone before finally drifting off to sleep. The first day passed, and morning came with fresh air and a sense of relative freedom. At least, you're surrounded by nature and not confined by walls, both internal and external. If people coexisted with nature and planted 2 trees in front of every house, their hearts would feel at peace, and they would sense their original connection to nature. I looked across the room and didn't see the Japanese man. I wasn't sure if he had gone up or down the mountain, or if he had already made it back to Japan. I opened the hut door and found Lucas and Arun waiting for me. I greeted the team, had my breakfast, and then we prepared to continue our journey. On the second day of walking, the trail changed, and the weather shifted. The green forest disappeared, replaced by a rocky path with mountains scattered to the left and right. I moved quickly, walking fast to shorten the time and reach the second station as quickly as possible. I passed climbers on their way down, exchanging greetings and smiles, sometimes asking about each other's country. I also met food suppliers and porters, exchanging a jambo, the Swahili greeting. We then encountered an American adventurer who was climbing on his bicycle. The atmosphere was full of fatigue and camaraderie, but it was also enjoyable. We passed small, beautifully designed wooden bridges and scenic valleys, adding a magical touch to the journey. The trail was long, especially when all you could see was vast white land. I don't know how Kilimanjaro managed to summit the mountain in just 7 hours. It was a huge distance with many challenges. It was an amazing achievement requiring exceptional strength and determination. Lucas and I reached the second station on a cold evening, a few hours ahead of the rest of the team. The place was full of climbers and charming wooden huts. I looked toward the summit of Kilimanjaro, which seemed surprisingly close, as if it was waving at us and inviting us to continue the challenge. I couldn't resist the temptation, so I suggested to Lucas, in an enthusiastic tone, that we keep going. He replied, "It may seem close, but it will take us more than 7 more hours." I went inside one of the huts to rest, where I found a group of climbers. I greeted them, then sat down to have a light snack. One of them asked me about my country and how long it had taken me to climb so far. I replied, "About a day and a half." The person who had asked me sat next to me, and we struck up a conversation. He was Algerian, living in Switzerland. The other 2 were a young man and a woman from France. We began talking about the good relations between our countries and shared experiences related to climbing mountains. He had climbed many mountains, and I asked him if he was a boxer because I had noticed the shape of his nose and ears. I wanted to test my simple physiognomy. He answered yes. So, I asked, "How long have you been here?" He replied that their climb would take 7 days. I was surprised and jokingly said, "Are you planning to live on the mountain?" The group laughed, and the Algerian responded, "You discouraged me a bit. I would have liked to climb with you to shorten the time." I reassured him, "Don't worry, time passes quickly. The important thing is reaching the summit." After a long conversation, I packed my bag and bid the group farewell, wishing them good luck on their adventure. As I wandered the area, time passed quickly, and darkness began to fall. Arun appeared and invited us to the dinner table. Dinner consisted of chicken, fried potatoes, and a local juice. Afterward, I headed to sleep. The hut was empty, and the cold was intense. I couldn't sleep because of the excitement for the next day. Sometimes, I would ask myself, what am I doing here? What brought me to this place? Is climbing the mountain a real achievement? Does it have any benefit for humanity? Could it be something that will put me in history? No, it's more foolish than anything and doesn't require philosophers to search for answers. Reaching a goal is an individual desire, not a collective one, an inner feeling that urges you to reach something you love and want to discover. It's an achievement you take pride in before yourself. Climbing a mountain is a journey of self-discovery, a challenge to nature, and ultimately a testament to the strength of human will. A few hours after midnight, I put on my climbing boots, as I had slept in my climbing clothes. Then, I placed the headlamp on my cap, washed my face, and searched for the team. I couldn't find them, so I returned to the hut and waited. After a short while, Arun arrived with breakfast, and we ate in the hut. Then, Lucas came and checked the climbing gear. Arun's journey had ended at this stage, and I would continue the ascent with Lucas and the second guide. We began our first steps in the final phase of the climb. My hands were shaking inside my black gloves, and my eyes were alert like a wildcat, like I had just woken up from a bear's hibernation. There were no winds or rain to impede our progress, but the cold was biting, piercing through to the bones, making each step slow. The second guide was leading the team, and sometimes Lucas would take the lead, while I kept up with them. We would rest from time to catch our breath. The place was eerily quiet, and the night was dressed in its finest black attire, adorned with a crown of stars like pearls strung together. I tilted my head up to the sky and saw a joyful crescent moon, which reminded me of Iori from King of Fighters video game. We were getting closer to the summit, and I stopped for a moment, suddenly feeling sleepy. Lucas asked if I was okay, asked for my name and country, and I laughed, surprised by his question. He said, "We're at a high altitude, and I thought you might have passed out." These are the questions we ask climbers to make sure they haven't lost consciousness from lack of oxygen. I reassured him, saying, "Don't worry, my friend. It's just a feeling of drowsiness." With every step we took upwards, we raced against the sun, which would soon show its beautiful face with its golden rays. The first thing a climber longs for is to see the sunrise and feel the first beam of sunlight touch their face. After hours of climbing and walking, we finally reached the summit. The view was magnificent, and we were standing on top of Africa. I took a moment to enjoy the place, as white clouds floated beneath us, the ice gleamed to our right, and a massive volcanic crater loomed to the left. Climbers from all nationalities were exchanging smiles, and the sun cast its morning greeting on its friend, the mountain. I took some photos to capture this immortal moment, then we prepared to descend the mountain. As in life, the descent is faster than the ascent, but the exhaustion is the same. During the climb, your thoughts are focused on the summit, but now they are directed towards the airport. We descended a few meters and rested near some large rocks, enjoying refreshing juice and light pastries. The breathtaking view of the land and sky stretched before us, and I wished I could live moments like this every day. In front of this scene, I couldn't help but reflect on the Creator's power and greatness. The second guide asked me, "If you had the chance, would you climb the mountain again?" I smiled and replied negatively, explaining that walking is very tiring, and it truly is. In my opinion, the joy of a dream or goal lies in reaching it, not repeating it. After walking for a few more hours, we reached the wooden huts at the second station. The sun was at its peak, and the place was filled with climbers. Some had just returned from the summit, carrying the exhaustion of the climb and the joy of reaching the top, while others were preparing for the journey. I was amazed by the sight of large crows with white necks, as if they were wearing diamond necklaces, circling the huts, occasionally perching above them as though guarding the place. Crows, like parrots, are very intelligent birds that learn quickly, and they should not be harmed, as they are considered fierce and vengeful birds. These social birds, which form complex communities similar to those of humans, ants, and monkeys, deserve respect and appreciation, not harm or pessimism upon seeing them. I took some beautiful photos of them, then entered one of the huts to rest. I found a Danish man and woman, probably in their 50s or 60s, wearing suitable athletic clothes for climbing, preparing their bags for the next day's ascent. I greeted them, mentioned my arrival at the summit, and wished them good luck with much encouragement. Then I placed my bag on a small wooden table and left the hut to give them some privacy while they organized their gear. I sat down with a mirror to examine my eyes, which were hurting a lot. I noticed that the whites of my eyes had turned red, so I asked a local if this was normal or if I had gotten sick. He looked at me and said, "It's just tiredness and lack of sleep." He was right. I had only slept a few hours the previous day. After a short while, I entered the hut and fell into a deep sleep. A few hours later, Arun knocked on the hut door, carrying dinner. However, I apologized, saying I wasn't hungry. He replied, "You haven't eaten all day." I told him that I had completely lost my appetite due to the exhaustion and fatigue of today's journey. I felt his concern for me, and I said, "Don't worry, my friend, we Muslims are used to fasting." He smiled and said, "It's okay, as you wish." I went back to sleep, feeling as though the conversation had been a brief commercial break or a short dream. The next day, we continued our journey, passing through rocky paths and then beautiful rivers, where we would stop by to take a little rest and quench our thirst with their fresh waters. After that, we passed through a forested path with clear waterfalls, and we encountered colobus monkeys, as well as the nocturnal galago, also known as bush babies, with their large, wide eyes. It resembled a mouse in its general shape, but it was larger and more agile. Lucas and I talked the entire way about various topics, from economic and political matters to the cultures of our two countries. We discussed some possible solutions for developing both countries, especially concerning tourism. A few hours later, we reached the starting point, where I received a certificate confirming that I had reached the summit of the mountain. The climb had taken about 3 days. The team congratulated me on this achievement, and I thanked them greatly for their help, hospitality, and the excellent organization of this trip, which will forever remain etched in my memory. I arrived at the hotel to rest from this enjoyable yet exhausting journey. The next day, I was looking forward to the fulfillment of a childhood dream, seeing wild animals living freely in their natural habitat. I woke up early, eager for that moment I had always dreamed of. I had breakfast quickly, and then the driver who had taken us for the mountain climb arrived and drove me to a station where I met Arab and foreign tourists who were preparing for an African safari trip. I waited for the group to finish their breakfast while I had a cup of coffee. A few minutes later, another driver arrived, wearing a round hat, military boots, and a brown protective outfit suitable for such trips, with binoculars hanging around his neck. His outfit was something I had long associated with nature documentaries I had often watched on TV. We climbed into an armored Land Rover, equipped with a roof that could be opened and closed, allowing us to enjoy the view of the open savanna. Finally, we arrived at the reserve. There were many tourists and several soldiers or safari guards around. The driver completed some paperwork, then allowed us to enter. The road was smooth at first, then turned into a mountain road. I didn't expect the area to be so high, nor did I anticipate the cold weather. After hours of driving, we started to descend a winding road toward the animal zone. The view was exactly as I had imagined it, vast expanses extending as far as the eye could see. The driver opened the roof of the vehicle, and I stood up to enjoy the view. Buffaloes were walking with heavy steps, their horns resembling old-fashioned hairstyles, and zebras were grazing in the green grass, supporting the Juventus team. After that, we continued our search for lions and hunting cheetahs. A short time later, I saw a lion sitting majestically on its throne, with 2 lionesses approaching it. It was lounging with dignity, and I began to observe it carefully. Its eyes were yellow like amber, sharp as an eagle's, watching for any reckless movement. It could tear apart its prey even before its claws did the job. A dark mane covered its head, adding to its majesty and beauty. Strong muscles bulged beneath its skin, and its wide nose sniffed the air, catching every scent. Without a doubt, it truly deserved the title of King of the Jungle. I wanted to get closer, but it said that lions don't befriend humans. I almost turned into a poet, wanting to write a poem to describe the scene, but the vehicle moved on to search for other animals. Along the way, we saw herds of wildebeest and flocks of flamingos. I was eager to see the hunting cheetahs, as I had always admired their graceful and dynamic form, their small face, and the black tear-like lines running from their eyes, as if made from ink. Nature experts say that these black lines protect them from the sun's glare, but I'm not sure I believe that. This big cat, or wildcat, was one of my favorite felines. I had hoped to see it chase after Thompson's gazelles, darting like lightning, but searching for it was like searching for tanzanite, and unfortunately, we didn't find it. The reserve was beautiful, but it was small compared to the vastness of the Serengeti. However, you could still find most of Africa's animals there. We continued our drive and came across some hyenas busy devouring a prey. I consider these animals to be the highway robbers of the wild, as their hunting method mostly involves stealing other animals' kills. Next to them were vultures, their long necks bent as they waited their turn to clean up the hyena's crime scene. Towards the end of our journey, we passed other animals, including massive hippos, with their large mouths wide open, bathing in circular lakes as if they were in a luxurious jacuzzi. This circle of wildlife was both harsh and beautiful at the same time. In this trip, I fulfilled my childhood dream of seeing these magnificent creatures. It might seem like a simple dream to some, but dreams are not measured by their simplicity or complexity. The important thing is reaching them. This journey also made me ponder a deep question. If I truly became a wildlife biologist or researcher, roaming the forests and savannas, studying animal behavior and uncovering the secrets of plants, would I maintain this passion and excitement throughout my life? Or would the daily routine kill those feelings? I honestly don't know, as I haven't lived that experience, but I would likely have been happy every time I solved a new puzzle or discovered a rare species of plants or animals. I returned to the hotel to pack my things and prepare to leave this beautiful country, with its lush green lands and kind-hearted people. I felt a sense of emptiness, as my childhood dream that had occupied my mind for so long was now fulfilled. I realized I needed another special dream to pursue, because living without dreams or goals kills the joy of life. While packing my bag, I received a message from Lucas inviting me to visit his family and home. Even though time was tight, I welcomed the idea, as a kind person like him deserved no refusal. I left the hotel and waited for one of his friends to take me to his house. While waiting, I spotted an old church and curiosity led me to step inside. I sat on one of the wooden benches while waiting for his friend. After a while, I heard the sound of a motorcycle approaching. When I looked up, I saw a man wearing a helmet asking for me. It was Lucas's friend. We reached Lucas's home, and he and his family welcomed me warmly. The house was beautiful, nestled amidst stunning nature. His family was from the Maasai people. After chatting and having a light meal, we visited Arun's home, where he greeted us with a wide smile. We spent some time exploring the area, and as the sun began to set, it was time to say goodbye. I bid farewell to Lucas and Arun, with promises of meeting again, whether in the Serengeti or Morocco. It had truly been an exciting day, and I hope to return one day for another adventure in this beautiful country. I returned to the hotel, cleaned up, and organized my things. I ate a little, then slept deeply. I woke up in the afternoon, then headed to the airport to finally return to my homeland. The mountains will remain towering, whether calm or turbulent, and humankind will persist in its determination to scale their peaks. Morocco, with its highest summit in the Arab world, holds tremendous potential for developing mountain tourism. To achieve this goal, eco-friendly hotels and restaurants should be built, along with health facilities and a medical center equipped between the village of Imlil and the mountain refuge near the summit. Qualified mountain guides and a helicopter service should also be provided. Moreover, investment in marketing and promoting mountain tourism is essential, through large-scale advertising campaigns, leveraging social media, and collaborating with content creators both within Morocco and abroad. The Ministry of Tourism should also establish a certificate that is given to climbers upon reaching the summit. To ensure the sustainability of this tourism, comprehensive plans must be developed to protect the mountain environment, while encouraging tourists to respect nature and local culture. Additionally, partnerships should be formed between the public and private sectors, as well as civil society, to ensure the success of this project. Climbing mountains is a beautiful hobby, full of meaning, challenge, and adventure for some, where you feel like Luffy on his way to find the One Piece. For others, it's just fatigue with no purpose, as people's interests vary, and that's what makes the world beautiful. Then there's a third group, who are neither mountain lovers nor interested in them at all. Their sole concern is to criticize what you're doing, asking questions like, "What's the point of that?" Or, "Why tire and exhaust yourself by climbing?" Or even, "Goats climb mountains too," as if mountain enthusiasts don't already know that. What they may not realize is that even lions and cheetahs climb mountains. The answer to these questions is always the same, asterisk. You're right, they just don't understand someone's passion for something. And even if you were to climb Mount Olympus, they would still say the same thing. Everyone has their passion in life and leaves a good mark on the world. We are all bound to leave someday, but we should always have a dream in our sights and work towards it, even if it requires much time and effort. I hope you have benefited from this story and climbing journey, and that you continue to enjoy following new journeys and exciting explorations. Thank you for your time and interest.